All right, my name is Dan. I'm going to be talking about the second sub-book. I already talked about chapter 5 of it, but now I'm just going to do the whole rest of it. And I'm going to do it with video. This is going to be spoilers, obviously. I have read the first chapter, no, almost the first whole chapter of the next book. Of the next sub-book, I should say. It's so confusing. And so if you haven't read these books, please don't be listening to this. And I'm going to do it. In the past, I've kind of opened up the book, and I've gone scene by scene, but it still has me jumping all over the place. I have put some notes on this just Word document, kind of ordering my thoughts by character as best as I can. There is going to be a little bit of jumping around, but just so I can go through some of the thoughts for each of these characters. Now, I've done that for the first for 4 of the chapters in this sub-book, but I haven't had a chance to go back with the 11th chapter, so I'll probably be, after talking about this, opening up the 11th chapter and just flipping through just to make sure that I haven't really missed anything major. Now, I want to talk about Crocus, Absolar, and Cotillion first. Maybe not so much Cotillion. He'll be kind of sprinkled in everywhere, but man, am I so excited about that guy. More and more and more am I just wanting to know about this empire and how everything started. And it sounds like Cotillion may have been there from, he's been there for a long, long time in one way or another. I don't know if that means, I'm very interested in that guy. I thought he was just another guy, maybe like Kellenved, but it sounds like he's someone who just keeps renewing. And maybe I was supposed to know that before, but very interesting. I'll talk about the name Dancer later. Oh man, there's just an info dump of stuff in this second sub-book, and I can't talk about all of it because there would just be too much. But I'll do my best in doing the things that I think mean something. And if there's other things, don't spoil them, but maybe just let me know in the comments, and I'll interact with you, because I want to make sure I'm juggling everything that I think I should be. All right, so it's interesting because there's Crocus and Absolar. And Absolar is, she's been kind of possessed, I guess, by Cotillion at one point. And she, the way I look at Absolar right now is, even though she's kind of ascending and there's more of a gap, at least through Crocus's eyes, there's more and more of a gap between her and others, especially him. I kind of see her more on the ilk of someone who's a little bit more like Perrin or Gruntle, or maybe even sounds like Karsa, going that way. In the side that, even though she has kind of attained some of the benefits of these ascendants or whatever, she doesn't really want that to be a part of her life, as far as I can tell. And then there's Crocus, who seems like the opposite, who's just doing everything he can and becoming this sweet assassin. He does have skills, and he probably would jump at the opportunity. And then Cotillion shows up and is like, hey, I guess I'm your patron deity now, aren't I? And Crocus is like, yeah, I guess so. I mean, oversimplification, but you know what I mean. And if I had to guess something, I would guess that Crocus could become somebody very dangerous for some of the people that we like. He seems very easy to influence. He has some issues. He has he's not very wise, as far as I can tell. seems like someone that could be manipulated if we weren't too careful. And I kind of am worried about him. He'll either die or he'll probably be picked up by someone, if I had to guess. Now, he wants some answers. He wants some answers in exchange for why Shadow Throne wanted to destroy Lysine. And I think why he wanted to destroy Lysine and the Empire, but I can't remember if and the Empire was a part of it, because I don't think that. I think later on, at least, Cotillion explains that no, it's not about destroying the Empire. In fact, they need the Empire to remain strong. It's still in their plans, but sometimes people have different ideas on how to preserve something properly. Look at two parents with raising kids. I think both have the same intent, usually, and then there's just a very different way of going about it. So it sounds like the way I think I'm reading this is Shadow Throne has this way of preserving the Empire and having it grow, which seems very dangerous to what Lysine sees him doing. And she thinks, well, if I did this other thing, then maybe... anyway, the answer that he gives to Crocus is, it's complicated. It's complicated. But in exchange, Cotillion wants Crocus to go out and kind of get some answers as well, especially regarding going to this moonspawn sort of sounding island, this island that drifts around, and to get some answers there. And in exchange, I was so excited about this. Crocus is like, hey, there's this hound blind. Can I summon this hound? I can't remember if it's a girl hound or a guy hound. But I'll just say a girl. Can I summon her if I'm in need? And Cotillion's like, okay, sure. And I was so excited about that. And that's just the last I'll say about that for now. Now, because I have read a little bit of Subbook 3, but this is going to be at Subbook 2. But it's going to be really hard because I just found out some stuff about Subbook 3. So, whatever. Really cool. Crocus and them, they get on this boat and they're on their way to this floating island, which, again, I think sounds a lot like a type of moonspawn. And they get there, and they meet the raddest dude. I think he's cool. Darist, who that's not his full name, but I don't know if they go into his full name in the second subbook, so I'll leave it there. We all know who he is. By the time we get to the third subbook, I'm still going to just leave it. Has a really cool sword, which got me super hyped, and he is the last of the Tistandi, as far as he knows, as far as he tells Crocus at this point, that he is there defending the Throne of Shadow, and he has been put there by Anomander Rake. And he's bitter that Anomander Rake isn't there, defending it himself. And I think that's very, very cool. Crocus has been sucked down, and he's kind of underneath. And Absolar's up above when they kind of docked, and we worry about her at this point. And there's these Tist Edur above, who I get more and more excited as I get to know these different Tist subcategories. And man, I'm very, very excited about where that goes. But again, I'm nervous about our Crocus, even though, man, he's been kind of annoying at times. Okay, did I miss anything with that? As far as yeah, I'll talk more about that in the third subbook. All right. So let's go to Callum. And Callum had this chunk in this subbook that I really didn't follow. He was the most murky for me, even though he has some really cool stuff that happens, and some really cool stuff again in the third chapter. Oh, was that the third chapter, or do I get to talk the chapter in the third subbook, or I might get to talk about that today? I can't remember if it's the last chapter of the second subbook or the next. Anyway, we get him, and he's been kind of helping train these 1,300 kids that have kind of been dumped onto Shadowthrone's plate. He's kind of adopted them, and they're taking to this assassin training, kind of under the tutelage of Cotillion as well. But Callum is there. Oh, I do want to get to. Sorry. I want to get back to the Throne of Shadow. That is happening there. I think it's very interesting. Oh, no, I'm not going to get there yet. That's going to come when we talk about this Leoric guy who is just blowing my mind, who I want to know more. I have my guesses. I might be totally wrong with him. But we have Callum. He is training these guys, and he is approached by Cotillion, who has a job for him. And Callum's ready to go because he's having these marital disputes and things. And, man, what exactly? Hold on. I'm forgetting already what the thing was. Let me see. Okay, so I'm back. I had to check. He had to basically do the same sort of thing. Cotillion wants Callum to find out who is threatening the throne of Shadow. Okay? And also something that I thought was interesting as I flipped through, I saw when Cotillion asks Crocus, hey, do you want me to bless you? Again, we have this idea of blessings with Ganos, Perrin, and I thought that's just interesting. And I'll talk more about who's threatening this throne of Shadow, because this is a big revelation when I think it's Leoric. Is he? Yeah. Whoever's talking with Haboric. Okay. And so in Callum's storyline, which is very cool, he gets some daggers from a shop in the 9th chapter, I believe it was. He gets some daggers from this guy who's basically looted a whole bunch of tombs and things. And he has these decks of dragon, and they notice an unaligned card, as well as this House of Chains. So that gets brought up again. And the daggers came, as far as we know, from the Chain of Dogs. And one is kind of imbued with this Odotarl within it. And also has this marking or stamp or whatever you would call it that Callum, I think, is interested in or may even recognize. And it sounds like maybe one of those daggers is imbued with elder magic, which it sounds like it either goes back a long way or is like one of Cotillion's and goes back a long way, or who knows. I can't recall. And he buys them with these dark diamonds that the guy knows. The guy who he's selling to knows that these are super valuable and only takes basically half of what was offered for him. So they go and find this area. He goes to where these Malazans are holed up. And there's this whole situation with the water being poisoned and people drinking the water and going kind of crazy. And he just goes and mercy kills them when they start going bonkers. And, it is a little bit confusing to me. But I think we get that sort of resolution in either this last chapter of this subbook, which I'll talk about today, or in the first chapter of the third subbook. But it's really, 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 really cool. He hooks up with the people who caught Karsa in the first subbook, the Ebron and whatnot. Okay. Right. Okay. So I'm looking at my notes, and I did write down what his job was. I just had it somewhere else. Okay. And I think it's really interesting, this gray area theme. Also, this mother, father, child theme. We have Mother Dark and Father Light. We have, and then the kind of the gray area. We have, the Tistandi, the Edur, and the Leosin. We have Mama Chemal and Papa Chemal, I guess, and child. We have maybe that lady, that Calm, who the Forkrel Assail. I think I'm saying that right. Okay, so don't laugh at me. I might be saying that totally wrong. Wondering what's up maybe with her different things, because it sounds like she's maybe one of these elder races, if you would call them that. Shamal, Jagat, Talan, and hers. Is that right? Anyway, doesn't matter. I think it's interesting because we have chaos and order, and then as the extremes, and then something in the middle. And it sounds like humans are the ones that most can kind of go either way. And humans just make a mess of everything. We have the Tists on both sides, and then the happy middle. But then when the humans get involved, it sounds like they're not very predictable, other than often a tyrant would come up and just do awful things. But I think that's interesting. And also, I think it's interesting as it kind of mixes with Karsa's kind of his kind of goals at the start to get rid of the cloudy blood or something, and to kind of bring things into a pure sort of sense where he's the new dad in all these tribes. Okay, well, not just him, but his tribe becomes kind of the one that spreads. Very interesting. And I think it's interesting because we have Corlat and Whiskey Jack, and so it's not like the Tistandi just mate with other Tistandi. They always have a partner who is not one of them. So isn't that cool? Isn't that cool? And it makes you wonder. Makes you wonder about their offspring. Right? Okay. Let's see. Let's go to our boy Onrak, who I want to know more about this guy. I want to know what the heck he did. Because it sounds like he did something a long time ago to get him in trouble, because he can kind of, I thought he was just hunting renegades and has this connection with the renegades. It sounds like he has the power of bonecaster tracking, kind of like Pran did. But he's like a bonecaster who's fallen from grace. I want to know what he did. Did he make out with a Jagat? Possible. I have no idea. But he obviously did something to kind of get kicked out of the group. And I love the partnership. I love the partnerships in these books. I don't know how he does it so they're so fleshed out. It might be a part of his D&D thing where, each of these characters actually had someone behind it. I don't know if all of these characters were played out with him and and Ian C. Esselmont if he exists. But Troll and Onrak, which again, I don't know. I want to know more about Onrak because he's super cool. He gives me some Tool vibes for sure. I mean, he's another whatever. He's another Talani Mass, obviously. But when someone shows him that they're kind of friendly with him and whatever, he's like, oh, well, I guess you're my friend too. And I love their little relationship. It's starting to become another talking tool for me. But he's going to walk right past Chained Troll, and then they make this exchange for saving Troll. And in exchange, Troll will tell Onrak about his enemies, and Onrak's like, I don't have any enemies. But he does. He does. He has some people kind of after him. And he breaks the chains and just kind of ragdoll drags him around with like no regard. And then they get to these massive stone statues, which it doesn't look like in the description they're as big as this. But maybe. They look way too big in this. But still is very cool. There's 7 of them. Just like the 7 hounds. Just like the 7 faces. And 2 of them are like reverberating, screaming while they're there. And it's so interesting because this also reminds me of the 7 that Karsa is whittling. We'll get to there. Whittling in this, in this stone, kind of chiseling in this stone tree. And that would be a massive tangent if I went down there at this time. But I will get there. And there's these 7. And they're looking towards, they're trying to find this gate. And 2 of them are kind of just buzzing with rage as they go past. And Onrak's like, oh, sweet. I can kill a Hound of Shadow. And so he shatters this paw. And Troll's like, oh, crap. Shatters this paw. And it's not 2 Hounds of Shadow. It's 2 Hounds of Darkness. Which makes me think I want to see the Hounds of Light now. And I think, isn't one of the hounds, the original hounds that we saw in the first book, isn't one of them light? Not dark? I don't know. I might be getting that wrong. But I want to see the Hounds of Light. And they just mess up. They just destroy Onrak. Pretty much. And he kind of has lost some of his powers. He's been shorn from his ritual. And when they see Troll, these 2 just kind of bounce out of there. So they're off doing whatever. Okay. They go into this ruined city. They're in the nascent, this shattered realm of shadow, which I think is cool. I love the layers of shadow, by the way. I think it's later on maybe. Who is it? It's either Haboric. No, it wouldn't be Haboric. Was it Fiddler? Looking down at their shadow and just kind of contemplating the different layers of it. Shoot. I'll get there. But, the layers of it where, I am still in control of this. Dang, I wish I could remember. Who that was at this time. Because often I remember the concept but not remember who did it. So please let me know. I'm sure I'll find it, but you can let me know if you've made it this far. Okay, so they keep going. There's this portal, and they find the Moranth munitions that are placed there. I love the Moranth munitions. If I was going to role play one of these characters, I think I would be Spindle, this sapper who's also a sorcerer, doing magic in one hand and having these bombs in the other hand. It's just so cool that, this is fantasy, but they don't only rely on that. They rely on some cool, just thrown explosives. And I love that. Because I'm usually more of I don't know if you'd call it a low fantasy or a soft fantasy guy. I do like generally it to be a little toned down. But in this, I'm all for whatever they have to throw at me, because it's just so cool. So they get to this place, they throw this thing, and then out come these Tist Leozin, not Leomin. Leomin's the other guy. Leozin. And finally, we get to Tist. I better put my headphones on to make sure. I probably have been yelling in this without knowing I'm probably exploding your ears right now. Finally, we get to the other Tist, and they come and they challenge Onrak, and they're just as arrogant as you would expect. And it sounds like they've been there for a long time, so long that they don't know really what's going on in the other outside realm. I don't know if all of them are in there. I bet there are some just kind of out of the portal. Maybe they've kind of left. Maybe they left long ago. Sounds like they've been stuck there for a long time. But I'm wondering if there are more of them and they've just been kind of chilling. So they come around and they want to kill Onrak. They don't really care about this Tist Edur Troll, which is cool. They're the mortal enemies of the children of Mother Dark, because they are of Father Dark or Father Light, and so they want to kill the children of Mother Dark, the Tist Andi, because they don't have any. They haven't been blessed by Father Light, but the Tist Edur have a little bit in them, so they're gonna allow Troll to have the privilege of serving them, which is awesome and terrible, but it's hilarious that they would have that arrogance in them. And so in this fight, I think it's cool. Onrak gets kind of messed up a little bit more, and he kind of shakes the bones out of them. And then up comes these 4 Talan Imas that are hunting Troll and stuff, and they're trying to get these renegades and things. But since whatever Onrak did really pissed them off, they're going, he's going to go to them now. And they want to make this new gate. They're kind of making this deal with the Talan Leozin to get out of the nascent shattered realm of shadow or whatever. And it's going to require the Talan, the Warrens of Talan, the Warren of Leozin, which I think is, it might just require their blood. I'm not exactly sure how that whole ritual went down, if I'm honest. Talad of Leozin, which their Warren is called Thirlen. And it's very cool that it's very close, kind of. I like how these Warrens aren't just separate Warrens, but I'm starting to kind of clue in that they are very close to one another. Light, like a spectrum of Warrens. Like light might be here, and then maybe there's fire, and then some kind of other heat thing, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, until on this end, there is the cold Warrens with the Jaga, which would make them, mortal enemies, and you could fight ice with fire. And I think that's very interesting, that there's probably this network of Warrens that that go together that I am all for. I am all for. So they'll need the light and the fire, because theirs is kind of fire-ish, right? And then they need some blood from this Talan Edur troll. And I really want to go into more of that, but that is in the sub-book 3, and it's awesome. So cool. And so cool. I love this relationship. Anyway, let's go to Felicin. And let's go to the 3 mages first under Felicin. We have Bidethal, who is the pedophile creep, who everyone hates Bidethal. Hiboric hates Bidethal. Karsa hates Bidethal. They don't want him to mess with Felicin. I can't wait to see, hopefully, if he gets what's coming to him. But that doesn't always happen. Doesn't always happen. We have Febril, the schemer. Sounds like he's doing some awful things, and we see kind of who he may be working with. And then we have Leoric. And I always kind of take note when it has that little, not the apostrophe or whatever. I'm so bad with, it's not a comma, but But we have him, and he's the one that is super mysterious, super powerful, and maybe the most reliable, seems to know the most. This sounds like this triumvirate sort of thing. Think of ancient Rome. Crassus, Julius Caesar, and Pompey the Great. We have these 3, and they all kind of keep each other in balance. So they know that probably Febril's up to something. They know that Bidethal's a creep. I'm sort of waiting for Leoric to show maybe that he's also one of these vipers, because they kind of describe these guys as vipers. Lots of vipers in the whirlwind. And I'm waiting for him to be a viper, because he sounds trustworthy so far, but I don't super trust this guy, especially if he's super powerful and stuff. And I'm just wondering. He knows about later on. Oh yeah. Okay, so let's go talk about Hiboric. I hope this is okay talking about it this way. He threatens Bidethal. Okay, we can skip that. He has these dreams about this jade statue buried in the Odotarl sands. And I am all about what's going to happen with wherever he's going. He's kind of becoming blind, or he is blind. But I love the point made that he's no blinder than anyone else in that around. He's no blinder than anyone else. Even though he can't see with his eyes, he has these other eyes of understanding, as far as I can understand. We've seen that. We've seen that in lots of things. We've seen that, with I believe Israel, Jacob became blind, right? Or Isaac in the Bible. It seems like often like these patriarch types in different mythologies and books and whatnot go blind, and as they get more wisdom, it's like their blindness goes to them. I don't know if that just is because they're getting old, yeah, I don't know if it's that, or if there's something more to that. If it's like a part of the wisdom in exchange for their, it's getting eyes to see in exchange for their eyes that see. Does that make sense? So it sounds like there's some kind of that going on with Hiboric. At least the way I look at it. It sounds kind of poetic that he's going blind as he's seeing more and more of what's going on. He has these dreams, and it sounds like maybe the Odotarl is losing some of its savor or whatever, losing some of its potency. Maybe. Kind of in the way that Karsa kind of can have sorcery kind of lose some of its potency as he has Ototarl within it. It sounds like maybe that is happening. He wants to go to the Ototarl mines, or he wants to go back to this jade statue and see what's going on. And so he is reviewing at one point. There's this scene where he's reviewing the cards in the House of Chains, and they're all looking at this, and the Shaik is there, the 3 high priests, and Haboric is there, and Bidithal is kind of acting like the Kalor, who doesn't, he's trying to deflect, it sounds like. And Felicin knows that something's up with this. She's kind of obsessed with this unaligned card and wants straight answers from Haboric. He's saying, I'm blind. Can you describe it? And eventually he kind of senses something, which I assume he senses who it is, and says, don't ask me anymore. Don't ask me any more of this. And the other priests kind of clue into that and want to know, especially probably this Leoric. And then we get to this internal monologue of Haboric, which is so cool, before he talks to Leoric. He talks about this blindness. He was blind, but in this, no more blind than anyone else. Death's precipice, whether first glimpsed from afar or discovered from the step within, or from the next step, was ever a surprise. A promise of the sudden cessation of questions, yet there were no answers waiting beyond, according to him, at least. Cessation would have to be enough. And this is a kind of a dark sort of thing. He goes on, the gods were welcome to wrangle over his soul, to snipe and snap over the paltry feast. And if mortals grieved for him, it was only because by dying he had shaken them from the illusion of unity that comforted life's journey. One less on the path. Now, Leoric shows up and has all this information about the Tist groups. He talks about the 3 kind of the Rashan, Tyr, and Mianus. He even mentions the triumvirate. He wants to know what Haboric knows in exchange for telling Haboric everything he can, or some things that he can, about these jade statues in the Ototarl mines. And I wrote down what he said about that. Let's see. He says that the Ototarl, that's they're kind of trapped within this Ototarl. These giants, many giants, not just one. And this blows Haboric's mind. And that's why I'm just so waiting to see what the crap these giants are. And they're maybe from this other realm, and they kind of anticipated that they were going to show up there. That's kind of like the entrance to that realm. And so they left this trap so that when they would go there, they just like bloop into this quicksand sort of stuff. And that's what he says. But Haboric thinks it might be kind of a byproduct of the giants passing through because of just the immense amount of Ototarl, or or the immense amount of sorcery. And I'm not really sure. But they swift gears again to the Tist, the Tist Andi, the Tist Edur, and I think they talk about the Tist Leosin here, and talk about Leoric is like, hey, what would happen if there was a tyrant from the Tist? A Tist tyrant. And to me, that has to be one of these Tist Leomin guys. I keep saying Leomin. These, let me just... Leosin, right? I'm going to say Leomin. So when I say Leomin, just know that if I say a Tist before it, you know You know who I'm talking about. I think that this tyrant might be from this. And, there hasn't been these tyrants in the Tistandi, and I think maybe there's a tyrant in the Tist Edur because it sounds like everyone's scared of them, but I'm confused now. Anyway, he's kind of warning them. He says, look at your own history. Look at human history. What if a person like, and now I'm saying, what if a Hitler, what if a Stalin, what if they would have, not died and didn't have just one lifetime, but extended on, like Calor extended on. Is he talking about Calor? Or I think he's talking about a Tist tyrant. But he might be talking about what if there was like a Calor. Anyway, I get confused about the details. I just go for the ride. Okay? I think that's very interesting. He obviously knows more. I think he knows about the Tist people, obviously. Which I think is interesting because I wonder where he knew that from. He either hung out with them, if that's even allowed, or he knows some stuff, like he's a historian like Diker or something like that. But that's very cool. And then there's this paragraph on page 478, which I'm going to read, which I read like 10 times. So he talked about this eternal thing, and then Haboric's like, eternal? He barked a laugh. Perhaps he is at that. He's like, what about Kellenved? Okay. Perhaps, but that's not the point I want to talk about. There's one detail you might consider, perhaps more relevant than anything else that's been said here, and that is the Tist are no longer isolated in their scheming. Separated and they are humans now in their games. Humans who've got the patience of the Tist, nor their legendary remoteness, which it sounds like the Leozin were really remote. Legendary remoteness. The Warrens of Kurald Galain, which I believe is the dark, and Emerlane, which is shadow, I think, are no longer pure, unsullied by human presence. Mianis, the path of shadow, I believe again, and Rashan, the path of dark. Perhaps they are proving the doors. Perhaps they are proving the doors into both darkness and shadow. Or perhaps the matter is more complex than even that. How can one truly hope to separate the themes of darkness and light from shadow? They are, as those scholars said, an independent triumvirate. Mother, father, child, a family ever squabbling. Only now, the in-laws and grandchildren are joining in. That is cool. So not just these mother-child, mother, dark, Tistandi, father, light, the Leozin, and child, but we have all these in-laws, and that's because of the human kind of intervention and presence and things. And this just blows Leoric's mind. And he's like, hey, I was about to warn you that the Tist people were about to meddle in your affairs, or maybe already, and you're telling me it's the opposite, and that just blows his mind. I love that part. I want to know more about this guy. I want to know where he got this knowledge from. He sees ties of the Master of the Deck to the Bridge Burners, and thus the Empire. Leoric sees this, so he's making these guesses. He's obviously tied to maybe one of these Bridge Burners, meaning there's probably a Bridge Burner still around. He's very observant. And Haboric asserts that even though he's a part of the Malazan Empire, or he was a part of it, or in these bridge burners, he kneels to no one. And this is what Leoric was kind of maybe concerned about, if he was going to be really, tied to one side over the other. So he kneels to no one. Very cool. And then that's when they go talk about the Ototaro mines. And then he's like, hey, I'm going to tell you some more, and it's going to reveal a little bit about me. And I was like, oh, yes, finally. And then everything just kind of fades to black, and I wanted to throw the book at the wall. I was so mad, but in a good way, because I want to know what's going on. All right, I need to zip through some of this because I'm dwelling on some of these people. Felicen finds out that her brother is still alive, and that just kind of crushes her a little bit. She's a confusing lady right now, and I'm sorry that I keep calling you Lacine. If you're listening to this, Felicen, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. I like this thing with the Vipers and the High Mages, a kind of likened to Vipers. Vipers are usually a bad thing, and I kind of see them in the same way as I see chains. But it's very interesting that these Vipers, or these snakes, kind of gather towards Karsa, who we haven't even gotten to. I like the idea of the whirlwind a lot. I love the idea of the whirlwind. And people that seem to find their way there when they are broken. As far as I can tell, again, how would that not be a way to use people for poor means? We can look at Karsa, and this whirlwind in a lot of ways reminds me of this Panian scourge, at least in its destructive ability. We can look at Karsa. Oh, excuse me. Gross. I'll probably leave that in. We can look at Karsa and see how his life has become a whirlwind. It has this chaotic energy towards the whirlwind, and everyone that ends up there seems to have their life kind of turned upside down, as far as it's like this chaotic flux. And there's this page, 360. I think it's poetic that it's that number. Talks about the whirlwind and people's lives turning around. But I guess that would be a 180. And the way to battle the whirlwind, as far as I see it. I know I say that a lot, as far as I could tell, but it is as far as I can tell. The whirlwind kind of changes you. And there's this kind of being creative is the antithesis of chaos, ordering something. So Felicen does it through poetry. Felicen the Younger as well. Karsa's doing it through his carving and things. And it's not so much in that creation of the thing itself, but if there's an antidote, I mean, I'm not reading that, but have you an answer? If one exists, Karsa says, I believe this is Karsa talking, if one exists, it will only be found in the search, and searching is at creation's heart, chosen one. So we have this whirlwind who only knows destruction. But we have Karsa, who is, I mean, he wants to create, and he's wanting to, so is Felicen wanting to create. This is this antithesis. It's this counterbalance. Isn't that cool? I might be way wrong. And I also think, I think of Buke, who he was at his lowest point in his own kind of whirlwind when he lost his family. And he's not going to stay stagnant like probably a lot of people within the whirlwind. Even though they would, Felicen knows that she's being used probably. And Karsa probably knows that Felicen's being used. And but the way to kind of come above that is to make sure that you aren't stagnant. You're active. I pointed to Buke. Buke was kind of in his own little whirlwind, but he was going to be active in pushing through that, and I think that's awesome. Let's go to Adjunct Tavor and this omen that they're all kind of gathered around them, and then this kid shows up with this bone, and they're like, oh crap. And so I love that Strings, who used to be Fiddler, it still is Fiddler, is like, hey, we will counter it by leaning into it and swallowing the omen, taking it on head on. And I love where that goes. It gives me goosebumps. Later on, they're all wearing these finger necklaces that have these bones of fingers. And I love this. And I love that also hands and the jade statue finger. I'm keeping it. A finger is another thing that I'm keeping an eye on. Also, bridge is another thing I'm keeping my eye on because names and things reoccur. I'm waiting for the real theming of the name Bridge Burner to really kind of solidify and be enriched into something, really means something more. I'm waiting for that. So every time we get to a bridge, like Onrak fought on a bridge, I kind of perk up a little bit. Anyway, Lieutenant Renal is kind of getting at everyone for having these bone fingers, and he doesn't have it. And then Tavor shows up and is kind of inspecting everyone and is all about that, all for it, and is like, you guys need to maybe have some, at least wear it the same way, maybe on your belt, and then you need a standard, which I was so excited about that. And then 300 Wiccans show up, and I had goosebumps when I read that. So it's like this Malazan force is really up against a lot, and a lot of it is, can Tavor do this? Can she lead? Gamut is looking at her like, can she lead? Temul, who is kind of put in charge of the Wiccans, he's thinking, can I lead? And anyway, it's very cool there. And they're really up against some things. And they're about to move out. Okay, so let's go to Lestara Yil, who I am starting to like more and more and more. She is this unwanted... she used to be this unwanted child that got roped in by one of these priests. It kind of talks about these nets that would just kind of gather in the children. Really gross. And she was brought into this temple of Rashan to be a shadow dancer. And this Rashan, all the cults, lots of the cults got kind of removed, but this was a sanctioned cult or sanctioned religion. And she got brought into it, and I had the wrong idea about Shadow Dancer because it's really creepy. These priests would look at the shadows of the dancers, and that's where they would kind of derive their... That's a part of the ritual, is looking at this shadow. And they've kind of forgotten the true meaning of it. And Cotillion shows up when she's very young and just destroys the place. Lets her go, lets Bidithal go, and kind of we hear that the intent of the shadow dancing isn't for this creepy ritual, but it's kind of this baseline sort of movement for being an assassin. So then Lestara, I mentioned in the last video that Cotillion went and collected Cutter, Crocus, and now it went and collected another, and this is this Lestara. But anyway, this is later on when she's older, right? Because earlier he came in and destroyed the place, and she kind of fled and became loyal to the Malazan Empire, became a Red Blade, And now Cotillion has her kind of doing things for him. I'm so interested in where this stuff with Cotillion is going because I tend to sort of like him. Is that crazy? Is that the wrong thing? But I kind of like him. Anyway, Pearl and Lestara are on their way during this kind of second book trying to find Felicen. I think it's funny that it kind of leads them towards Stormy and Gessler and this boy who's making the little finger necklaces. And he wakes Stormy, who picks him up and like breaks his everything. He kind of messes him up. He's this Claw. People recognize him as the Claw. There's this mage outside who kind of hides himself, but he's like, yeah, you're right there. I think that's funny. And they are just trying to find out what's going on. And interesting in that scene as well is the ship. That ship there is the wood, some of the wood at least, is from this drifting island of shadow or whatever, this black wood, which is very cool. I think we're almost done here. Also, I want to bring up the severed head since we're here, because we have this ritual that the Talani Mass do when they're dying, where they like sever their heads and place them somewhere to be looking up at the sky. I think of the Olmec, those heads, because they seem to be often looking up when they find them. And I don't know if that's by accident, but if there's some kind of ritual thing where they're looking up in the sky, but there's these Olmec heads. And that's what I think of when I read this. But also, the blood is still warm in these heads of the Tistandi who are on this ship stacked. And it's like this preservation thing. And, you know, I don't know what ritual is involved with that, but it's very cool. And then in the Talan thing, they'll bring the sword back to their place of their birth, which I want to know more about where generally these people were born. Are we just going to find a whole bunch of swords somewhere? I'm sure that's coming, something like that. Or if we've already seen that, but I'm sure maybe something like that. There's just going to be all these swords somewhere. But how do you even have this sorcery to like do this head ritual thing? And is that what happened? The Talan in the Nascent, is that what they did with all these Tistandi? Or am I getting that totally wrong? Kind of cut their heads off and still had them doing the oars. They were the oarsmen, right? Am I remembering that right? Might not be. Anyway, I don't want to get everything because there's just so much. But I think I'm just at Karsa now. And then Corbolo Dom. Karsa, in Chapter 10, he is not impressed with these 7 faces. He's whittled them like he was supposed to. And he's kind of created also these 2 fallen friends of his, these likenesses. And I think it's cool because he also is looking at these 7 and thinks there's something not quite right about them. They're perfect. I have it. You know, I've seen these faces, but there's something not quite right about them. And then it's about the way the light hits them. And I think that's very cool. Like now that I see them in this other light, I see them totally different, which is very cool. Again, I say that so much, but as this is happening, these snakes are interested, which who the heck is the goddess of vipers or whatever? I'm just so interested. And so they wake up. And Urugal is kind of the main one. Is like, hey, what the heck took you so long, buddy? We've been waiting forever. And he says, well, you know, the first thing you do is you criticize me. You're welcome. And he's like, well, we want you to destroy these other 2 statues. They are an abomination. He's like, no, I'm not going to do it, and I could destroy you too. And he warns them to not have Snark with him, that he could destroy them. And they're like, yeah, likely story. But he could, he has more power than they do in some sense. They only have the power that a person will give to them. And I think that's a big part of how people ascend in this. People only ascend if people give them that sort of, if people become loyal to them. And that's where they gain their influence and their power. But it sounds like as that happens, there is some actual changes in them. Who knows? Who knows? But that's a part of it. It's not like they just get the power by being powerful themselves. They get the power and it might be here where Karsa's looking at the shadows or someone. But, they are following him. They are only as powerful as he gives them power to be. They are like shadows. I might be getting that totally wrong. But it sounds like that's, yeah. I think it's very interesting. There's this page. I bet I could find it in 2 seconds. Where Delam, they show up. Oh, yeah. Before that, he's like, hey, you want me to go into this Jag-Oden place to free you? And they're like, yeah, actually, yeah. And then he's like, yeah, I'll go, but you guys better. Man, I'm burping and stuff. That's probably so gross. Sorry. And I probably don't have time to go and edit all this. Sorry. That was more of a hiccup burp. Sorry. Okay, so we have Delam, who I loved this scene, by the way, where they are kind of there in spirit. Other people don't see him, but they are. He's going to lead them one more time as shadows. These ghosts are going to be kind of like his shadow, and he says, I guess it's better to lead shadows or lead ghosts than to have them be after you. This is what Delam says. He says, none can defeat you on this journey. You lead the enemy in circles. You defy every prediction and so deliver the edge of your will. We sought to follow but could not. And then it's this amazing things. He said, Delam, Thord, Baerath Guild, it is I who failed you. Can I basically lead you once more? But I think it's interesting because, he's the one in charge of his fate. If he wants it to be, as far as what I can see here. I think it's very interesting advice. He's about to go on to this quest to the west, I believe, and of where they are. We have the adjunct coming from the south. We have people, Malak-Ral, going south. We have maybe Dujek, who I'm assuming is going to arrive from the north. We have Callum, I think, who's coming to arrive, circling the whirlwind. I think that's... Anyway, Leomin goes and kind of says one last goodbye. They're sort of buddies. And says, hey, what do you guys say in parting? And Karsa says, may you slay 1,000 children. He's like, all right. Well, journey well then. Very, very cool. Now, the last thing we have in this chapter, or in chapter 10, I think, or the last thing to talk about is Corbollo Dom and his schemes. He respects Whiskey Jack, almost like worshipped the guy, but not worshipped him necessarily, worshipped what he could have done. He was powerful enough and influential enough. Remember, everyone loved him the same way everyone loves Coltane. Everyone reveres him enough where he could have taken the throne for himself. But he's scheming. Now Leomin and Haborik are still threats to them, to this little plan with Camist and Corbollo Dom. Febril will kill Felicin. Tavor will kill Febril. And then all will destroy Tavor and the Malaz army. And then they will crush the rebellion. They will return as conquering heroes to Lacine, and then they'll kill Lacine. Then they'll have the throne. Corbolo Dom, this other Nappin, will have total domination, destroy all the races, and destroy anyone who even just thinks differently, has different agendas. Get rid of all magic and gods if they can. No more meddling from the gods. It will be a mortal world and hopefully no magic. So that's crazy. So let me just quickly, if I can, let me just find the start of chapter 11. And this is when they're just about to go north. We see Cotillions mound, and it's being kind of like swarmed by these ants, which, does that mean even the ants are, the crows came and ate Cotillion away, and now these ants are there? They look at... I'm sorry, this won't be quite as tidy as the last thing. But this is no longer Coltain's war. This is... and they're kind of... Tavor is almost echoing Coltain in some ways, and we wonder if she's going to have the same fate. We have Gessler talking with Strings. And Gessler doesn't have the same faith as Strings. Everyone had their faith in Coltain, and look what it got them. Look at these marks, these post holes, and look at these smudges, and ask the dead how if their faith served them. And Fiddler, at Strings, who I love, says, a faith betrayed does not destroy the notion of faith. In fact, it's the very opposite. We have this view that even though people revered Coltain, and I think we'll get to that, it was Diker who delivered the refugees. And even though Coltain had this vial, he gave it to Diker. It's like he saw something in Diker that even maybe he didn't see in himself, that maybe Diker's really, really the guy that we should love. And it only got him staked to a tree, but we know that he's back. Okay, so talked about Corbolo Dom, so we don't have to talk about that. But they, we're hopefully going to get back to them. And then Topper shows up at the adjunct's tent and doesn't have good news. Remember, Topper is the one who showed up with Ganos Perrin early in the first book. We don't see him much. He just kind of shows up as Lacine's sort of messenger. So there's Lacine, adjunct below her, and also Topper is in there, maybe somewhere, as the messenger, like the herald, sort of. And then we used to have Callum as just below them, as this master of the claw or whatever. Not good news. Terrible losses in Genebacus, which will shake all of them. They'll get news that Whiskey Jack's dead, and this is just the biggest blow to everyone, because everyone loves Whiskey Jack. This is the worst news to Fiddler, now Strings. And this is one of my favorite scenes in all the books, where he is just totally down and goes off to be on his own. I love that a lot, because that's true. A lot of people, when they feel down and on their own, they will try to be on their own and go on their own when they probably should be around someone. But sometimes you feel like you just need to be on your own. So he goes to be on his own, and he hears weeping. And it's this Temur kid who's put in charge of the Wiccans and feels like he can't lead them. and he has Diker's horse. Diker entrusted this horse to Temul. But he feels like, I will take care of this horse until Diker returns, if he ever returns. And so Fiddler kind of takes on, he even though he's down himself, kind of like a Kovian, he will try to take on the grief and just be a person to listen to for Temul and try to build him up. He's straight with him. He says that his name is Fiddler. And he says, if they won't listen, let's kind of scatter their horses or whatever and have them walking with the rest of us. That might humble them a little bit. And it might take one day. It might take 3 or 4 days. But I will help you. He says, face me. Earlier on, face me. I will be your witness this night, and we alone will know it. Give me your words of sorrow, Wiccan, and I will listen. He does that. This Temul obviously honors Coltane, but he's like, Diker. Diker's the guy. He fought when he didn't even, he wasn't a fighter. He didn't even have to. Fighting was not expected of him. Coltane that even gave him a stone. This is where Fiddler finds out about that. We figure that Coltane now through this is reborn in this other child, which can't wait for that. Do we already know that kid? I don't know. And then this last part of this scene just broke my heart for Fiddler. So, he kind of helped Temul feel better and gives a sharp nod and is like, we didn't talk. Like this didn't happen. This is just between us. He's like, yeah. Then it says, Strings watched him ride into the darkness. He sat motionless on the boulder for a time, then slowly lowered his head into his hands. So he's suffering from loss as well. And that really, that really affected me. Tavor feels like her brother is dead and did it heroically, but no more bridge burners are around. The Dujek is still coming to the north. He was supposed to come with a big army, which kind of makes her feel like, oh, maybe Lysine actually didn't trust me with this. And now that Dujek is coming with less, we might be hooped. I'm hoping that the bridge burners are back soon. I'm hoping they come back. If anyone should come back, it's got to be them. I wonder about this. The bridge burners were born in Raraku, right? And they have this song, and if even one bridge burner gets to Raraku, one of those, they can sanctify the song. I don't know what that means, but I know that Callum is close, and I know that Fiddler is close. And that's all I want to happen. That's all I think about. This has been such an exciting book for that reason. That's what I want. That's what I want to happen. The Topper says that the Empire's badly hurt. Doesn't have very many good things. Says that there are some showing up that are coming that are worshippers of Fenner. And maybe not to let them know that Fenner is not around anymore. We hear that most of these people are dead. Everyone's kind of mourning, but that Quickben is not dead. And then, very cool. I love this last part, and it's the title of Subbook 2 about cold iron. It says, since we're looking for revenge, you'll want it hot, I expect. You expect wrong. Look at Tavor. There won't be any heat from her. In that she's just like Coltane. It's obvious, Fiddler. The iron needs to be cold. Ugh, that gave me goosebumps reading that the first time. Did again. Cold. We get it cold enough. Who knows? We might even earn ourselves a name. Strings made his way to his small tent. I'm skipping to the very last part of this. Something of Cuddle's words came back to him. Iron. Cold iron. Yes, it's in her. And now I'd better search and search hard to find it in me. I love Tavor. I love this lady. I think she's cool. And yeah, I love in the third book especially when we start to really get close to the climax and finally we know who everyone is, kind of where they're going, sort of. And I love that it makes great whiteboard material. So I'll probably have one of those at the end of Subbook 3. I like where it's going. And hopefully I didn't ramble too long. You know, this was long. But I've really liked this book. I don't hear as much good stuff about it as the other things. So the main standouts for me, I want to know more about this Leoric guy, why he has that dash, because that usually means someone old, right? I also want to know. I want to know what happens when a bridge burner gets into Rararku. I want to know what happens when Felicin and Tavor eventually meet. If that's going to become terrible, because it sounds like that's about to happen. I want to know more about this Throne of Shadow. I want to know more about the Leosin. I want to know more about Onrak. I want to know more about the Malazan Empire. I want to know more about Cortillion. Million things. I want to know more about Karsa. Karsa's not even at the center of what I want to know about. Probably a lot of people love Karsa in this book. I want to know more about what Haboric is up to and when he gets there and what he's going to know. There are so many things. I just want to know what this stuff is. I don't even need any stuff to happen. I just want to have some answers. I feel like I'm right there to some answers. And I can't wait to keep going on and keep going on in the series. And I'll see you on the next video, whenever that's going to be. Thanks.